Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, you'll meet an emerging star in the world of Parkinson's research. His incredible story just ahead.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, the final frontier for medical research is the brain, and we're learning more about Alzheimer's, we're learning more about dementia, we're also learning a lot more about Parkinson's, and that's why I invited my next guest into the studio and turned the studio green for him, Dr. Bradley McDaniels. He's an assistant professor at UNT in the Department of Rehabilitation and Health Services. Thanks for coming on the show.
So glad to be here, Jeff. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
And you have been fascinated with Parkinson's for a number of years now, but it starts with something that happened in your own life.
Yeah, about 13 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, really out of the blue. I had lived a very healthy life. I had spent nearly 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry. And once she was diagnosed, I thought, what can I do to make a difference in my mom's life? And I realized I was a little too old for medical school at that point, and kind of serendipitously fell into a PhD program at the University of Kentucky. And pretty much at that point dedicated my life to saying, what can I do to make my mom's life a little better tomorrow than it was today?
And give us an update on your mom. She's still alive and well?
She is. She'll be 79 this year, and she's doing fairly well. Mainly her issues are cognitive. With Parkinson's, you have, tremor issues, gait issues, some cognitive issues, and you kind of fall into one of those camps. And hers is cognitive, so memory, executive functioning, things like that are challenging for her.
And you're really making a name for yourself in an area of Parkinson's that hasn't been discussed a lot, loneliness. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so, I think one of the challenges, and it really came to be after COVID, right? Before COVID, we talked about loneliness, but with the lockdown, social isolation, all of those things, we began to see these problems coming up. We saw depression skyrocket. We saw suicide skyrocket, substance use disorders. And so we began looking more and more into loneliness and assessing what are the challenges that people who have chronic illness face. And we found that people with Parkinson's disease were affected significantly by loneliness. And one of the challenges with that is it prevents them, because they don't engage with society, they feel isolated, they feel alone. And when someone's alone, we know from the research that loneliness results in greater symptoms. So your tremor gets worse, your depression gets worse, which are all issues associated with Parkinson's.
We've got some video from our library that we're going to put up of scientists studying the brain. And let's talk about what we do know about Parkinson's. So we were talking before the show, it's a lack of dopamine?
Yeah, so Parkinson's really is, you have dopamine receptors in the substantia nigra, which is in the brainstem. And when people have Parkinson's disease, these dopamine receptors begin to die off. And so the dopamine that you produce is no longer effective in the brain. And so one of the areas that dopamine affects is movement. And so when you don't have adequate dopamine, you can begin to develop tremor. You can have gait abnormalities where you're shuffling your feet when you walk. And so now, obviously, what makes the most sense is how do we treat that? And we've been using dopamine levodopa for many, many years to treat it. And we've continued to improve the delivery of that medication, but that's still the mainstay of treatment at this point.
And let's talk about, there is no cure. Are we slowing the progression at all?
Not much, quite frankly. We're continuing to do research looking at what medications might be effective. You look at something like multiple sclerosis and you have disease-modifying therapies. We're not there yet with Parkinson's. The best thing that we have is to slow progression is exercise. Every doctor who treats someone with Parkinson's is going to let them know that exercise is essential to your well-being for holistic health. And those who exercise have better motor symptoms, and they have lower depression, lower anxiety, apathy, all of these other mental health issues that are very common in Parkinson's.
And what is the connection between exercise and that part of the brain that's affected by Parkinson's?
Yeah, I think that one of the things is you get an increase in dopamine production with exercise. I think there are a variety, and it's multifactorial. Does the exercise, because it's often done in a group setting, does that decrease loneliness? And we know what the association with loneliness and motor symptoms is. So we think that's part of it. Just having any movement has been shown, whether it's riding a bike, rock steady boxing is this thing that's very popular among Parkinson's patients. So any type of movement is helping our brains function at a higher level.
And what's been the reaction, because you've been published several times, what's been the reaction to your research?
I think that it's been great. As I talk to people who have Parkinson's, as I'm preparing to do studies or working through the data that I already have, there's a lot of interest because as I talk to them, this is the stuff that they're concerned about. We know how to treat motor symptoms with Parkinson's, but what we don't talk about nearly enough is things like depression. 50% of people who have Parkinson's disease also have depression, and oftentimes it's undiagnosed because the question's not asked.
Right.
And we recently actually wrote a paper on delivering the diagnosis of Parkinson's, talking about how essential it is that we ask the right questions, that clinicians ask the right questions. What are you struggling with? How's your mental health?
Rattle off a few statistics. So how common is Parkinson's?
8.5 million people in the world have Parkinson's today, around 1 million in the U.S., but the startling fact is around 90,000 new diagnoses are happening each year. And, we're still figuring out what causes Parkinson's disease, but what we do know is the strong association with age and Parkinson's. So it makes sense as the world is graying, getting older, right? Sure. We're going to increase the number of people who have Parkinson's.
And we all know the famous stars, Muhammad Ali famously had Parkinson's before he passed. Michael J. Fox is almost the poster child for Parkinson's. What did celebrities like that do for research?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Michael J. Fox started his organization, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which has been on the forefront of Parkinson's research, raising billions of dollars to throw into the Parkinson's community. And I think just being able to put a name with a condition has been helpful. But before the show, you and I were talking about, most people, if you ask them what Parkinson's is, they have this picture in their mind of an old guy hunched over, maybe with a tremor. That's not the real picture of Parkinson's today. We see 8% of the Parkinson's population is less than 50 when they're diagnosed, which was Michael J. Fox.
Right.
He was in his 30s. And so we're changing the way that we view Parkinson's today. And because it's growing, people are just much more aware.
And we don't know if it's hereditary, do we?
We know there's a genetic component, particularly for the young onset population. Many of the young onset group has a genetic defect that's causing them to have Parkinson's. For the older population, which is diagnosed 60 and older, it's mainly environmental. And, you think about well water. People who drank well water growing up are more susceptible to Parkinson's because of the chemicals that are put into the ground that seep into the well water, and you drink it and
right.
You have Parkinson's. We've got these lawsuits going on right now. If you watch the news that say, hey, if you've been exposed to Roundup
right.
and you have Parkinson's, call this. And so that's really the association is the environmental is more of a factor than genetics.
Absolutely. Well, in the final minute or so, I want you to talk to the caregiver out there who might be taking care of someone with Parkinson's. What's your message to that person?
I think the key to that is Parkinson's is a family disorder. I think that so often we think about it's just the individual who has Parkinson's, but the caregiver, if the caregiver's not well, the person with Parkinson's isn't well. And so just like I teach my students, you can't pour from an empty cup. And so, meaning that the caregiver needs to make sure that they're taking care of themselves as well. They're exercising. They have a social calendar that they're engaged with. They have people in their lives who matter. And so when they do those things, just like we ask the person with Parkinson's to do,
Yes.
the family is better and outcomes are improved.
Wow. You're an amazing guest. Thank you for dedicating your life to such an important field. We're going to end with the Facebook page for his department at UNT. Put it up on the screen there. You can jot it down. Dr. Bradley McDaniels, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.